It started with the sounds. Every morning around 2 a.m., I'd hear something scuttling above me in the attic. At first, I thought it might be squirrels or maybe a raccoon. But after a week, I realized that whatever was up there was much, much bigger. And worse, sometimes it sounded like it was dragging things across the floor. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was probably just hearing things. But after a week of restless nights, the sounds didn't go away. Instead, they got louder. I tried to ignore it, burying myself under my blankets, trying to convince myself it wasn't happening. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. One night as I was lying in bed, I heard a thump followed by a long, scraping noise that made my skin crawl. My heart pounded as I strained to listen, every muscle tense. This wasn't normal. I needed to check it out. Arming myself with a flashlight, I climbed up to the attic door in the hallway ceiling. My hands shook as I pulled the ladder down, the rickety steps creaking under my weight. There was a lot of dust and my eyes strained to adjust to the darkness in the attic. With my heart racing, I aimed the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the boxes and dusty furniture. Everything seemed to be in place, but just as I was about to turn around, something moved. The beam of light caught a glimpse of a figure hunched over, crouched in the far corner. I caught my breath and froze, too afraid to move. I could only make out its shape in the dim light, but it was big, larger than any animal I'd ever seen. Its limbs were too long, its body twisted in a way that no human body should bend. I held my breath, hoping it hadn't noticed me. The figure turned and looked at me. It wasn't a ghost. No, this thing was real. It had skin stretched thin and pale over its bones and eyes that glowed faintly, reflecting the light from my flashlight. They were watching me, filled with something I could only describe as hunger. And then it did something that made my blood run cold. It smiled. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth, each one sharper than the last. What the hell is that? I stumbled back, covering my mouth with my hand in case a scream escaped. But the creature didn't move. It just sat there watching me, its eyes tracking everything I do. As I backed away, my foot caught on a loose floorboard and I stumbled. The noise seemed to snap it out of its trance. It started crawling toward me, its limbs twisting and contorting as it dragged itself across the attic floor, its nails scraping against the wood. I scrambled back to the ladder, climbing down 2 steps at a time and nearly tripping. My hands shook as I grabbed the rungs, practically throwing myself down to the hallway below. As I slammed the attic door shut, I heard it on the other side scratching, its claws dragging across the wood as it pressed against the hatch. I stood there panting, my mind racing. This thing wasn't just some animal. It was something else, something that shouldn't exist. And it was trying to get out, to get me. By now I was so hyped I kept talking to myself. I walked up and down the passage, trying to figure out what that thing up there was. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, clutching my flashlight, my eyes fixed on the attic door, half expecting it to burst open. The scratching stopped around dawn, but I knew it was still up there. The next night I could still hear the faint scratching, the sound of something dragging itself across the attic floor. I really was hoping this was just a nightmare, but I knew it wasn't. I was in the attic and I saw the creature. I drifted off to sleep. I'm not sure how long I slept, but I thought I heard a whisper. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. It sounded like a voice speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I listened intently, and then I realized this thing was calling me. I shot out of bed and ran down the hallway. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, as if the thing in the attic knew I was awake, as if it could sense my fear. And then the attic door creaked open. Frozen in terror, I stared at the trap door. A long, bony arm reached down from the hatch, clawing at the edges of the opening. Slowly, it pulled itself down, its limbs twisting and contorting as it crawled down the ladder. I backed away, but I was trapped. I had nowhere to go. The creature's face emerged from the darkness, its twisted smile stretching wider than ever as it crawled toward me inch by inch. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, filled with a hunger. "Why are you here?" it whispered. The voice that came out of that thing almost made me scream. The voice sounded like nails on a chalkboard, grating and unnatural. I couldn't answer. Hell, I could barely breathe. The thing crept closer, its twisted body bending in impossible angles as it pulled itself along the floor. I scrambled backward, my back hitting the wall as it closed the distance. Just as it was inches away, it stopped. It leaned in its face inches from mine, its breath cold and foul. "You are in my home," it rasped. I was terrified. What did it want with me? It stared at me for what seemed like an eternity, and with a final jagged grin, it pulled itself back into the shadows, disappearing into the attic. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone, trembling in the silent hallway. What I don't understand is why it didn't attack me. Why the warning? Up in the attic, this thing looked so hungry, but yet, when it confronted me, it didn't attack. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, or any night after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear it scratching, whispering, waiting for me to make a mistake. And now, as I sit here listening to the sounds of it dragging itself across the attic floor, I realize something terrible. It's never going to leave, and neither can I.